Hi, it's Dr. Betty Robin with the Dentistry Rising podcast. I'm an attorney, a dentist, and a practice cell broker. This podcast is my brainchild to help inspire, motivate, and educate dentists to create the practices and lives they want. I've personally owned 3 practices and worked with thousands of dentists in my capacity as their broker or attorney. I want to put my expertise to work for you and help you find the success you want. After all, you're my peeps. Let's get going. If you're thinking about a lease, you probably fall into one of 3 categories. First, you're just going into a space, probably as a startup or possibly a relocation. Second, you're considering a practice for a potential purpose. Or third, you're renewing your lease. Today we're going to talk about basic types of leases, what CAM means, and what's usually included in the CAM, and what shouldn't be included in the CAM. With the first 2 scenarios, you're doing a startup or buying a practice, they're pretty much the same. But if you're renegotiating a lease, you may have little negotiating power, especially if you have the same landlord. But first, you need to know what kind of lease you're looking at. The title doesn't always tell the full story. There are 3 main types of leases for dental office space. I've talked about this before, but I'm going to review here briefly, so I'll go kind of quick. So you have first, a triple net lease, second, a modified gross lease, or third, a true gross lease. Okay, I'm going to define all 3. A triple net lease means all the costs of the space in the center are passed along to you, according to your percentage of occupancy. This is the most expensive kind of lease, and these kind of spaces are usually in desirable, upscale retail centers. In a modified gross lease, the increase of the expenses of the space in the center are passed along to you, again, according to your percentage of occupancy. The increase is calculated from the expenses of your base year. That is your year of occupancy, the year you moved in. A modified gross lease is the most normal kind of lease for dental office space, at least in more highly populated areas of California. Sometimes there are carve-outs under modified gross leases, so look for those. For example, a common carve-out would be for your air conditioning unit, which you might be solely responsible for. And lastly, a true gross lease. A true gross lease is normally found in less desirable centers or less populated areas of California. Gross leases are by far the most desirable kind of lease, assuming the lease rate is fair, because you're basically only paying the rent and not all the other expenses of the center. Okay, let's move on to CAM. What is CAM? CAM is our initials, and it stands for Common Area Maintenance Charges. Sometimes people also say the triple net expenses instead of saying CAM, but it means the same. Basically, it means all the expenses in excess of your rent, whatever name you call it. So in triple net leases or net leases, everything is passed through. But there's also double net leases or net leases or single net leases. Don't get too hung up on terminology, but you do need to know what is being passed through and what isn't. Bottom line, you want to know how much your lease is going to cost you in excess of the stated rent. At very least, ask the landlord for an estimate. If you're looking at assuming someone else's lease, like when you're buying a practice, look at the historical numbers for the CAM over the past year and maybe the past 2 years. So divide that monthly amount of CAM by the square footage of the space so you can determine the true cost of the space per square foot. If you determine the true cost of the space, then you can compare it with other spaces, and then you're comparing apples to apples. As an example, if the lease rate is $2.50 a square foot and the space is 1,500 square feet, your lease costs would obviously be $37.50 per month. That's pretty normal, if not cheap, in Southern California. But then, let's say the CAM averages $500 a month. So you'll divide the 500 by the square footage, here in this example, 1,500 square feet, and you'll find that the CAM cost you an extra 33 cents per square foot, making the total rent cost $2.83 per square foot per month. So if you do this calculation, you'll see it's a lot easier for you to compare one space to another. You just can't ignore or forget the CAM. I gave you an example above of a low CAM, but they can often approach $1 a square foot, so you definitely need to pay attention. And expenses as well as lease rates go up every year. You also need to read carefully in the lease what is included in the CAM and know that many of these items are negotiable. Here's a few things I don't like to see in a CAM. 1. Reserves. Reserves are the money landlords may collect before using it. Unscrupulous landlords may collect money for many years before using it. For example, they may collect an extra $300 per tenant per month for a new roof, and then not do the roof for 5 years or more, if ever, all while holding your money and sometimes kind of forgetting about your money. You may be able to negotiate reserves out of a lease altogether. But if that's not possible, then limit the time frame and or the amount. Just as an example, let's say you want to ask that the landlord not collect a reserve for a repair that's not going to be performed within a year. And if that money isn't used, it will be returned in full to the tenants and hopefully with interest. You can also try to limit the amount collected. For example, propose that no more than $250 per month can be collected for a reserves period. Second, management fees should be limited. I'd really like to exclude management fees altogether, but this may not be a possibility. If it's not possible, then try to limit them to, say, 5% of the rent or even 10%. But somewhere there should be a limit to protect yourself from unscrupulous landlords. This isn't usually an issue with big landlords, although it can be, but I see it more commonly in small landlords. Number 3, legal fees for issues involving other tenants. You can try to exclude legal fees altogether, but definitely limit them to issues involving other tenants. Or you definitely don't want to have to pay for issues involving other tenant. It's really not fair if you have to pay a landlord for trying to kick a tenant out, etc. Number 4, purchasing equipment. Some CAM allows landlords to purchase all kinds of equipment. I don't think you should be responsible when a landlord decides to buy a tractor or a mower or anything else the landlord may choose to buy. Just make sure you read and you know and you understand and make a list of all the items that constitute the CAM, so you and your attorney could try to negotiate some of it out. And then don't forget to ask for a CAM reconciliation every year if you have a triple net lease, so you can see what's being charged to you. Another thing to look for in the CAM is how expenses are passed through and how they're dealt with. We have 2 main categories of expenses, which are regular everyday expenses and then big expenses that are capitalized. Normal everyday expenses like the trash, the water, are passed along to tenants according to the terms and conditions of the lease and the percentage of occupancy. But what about a big expense like the roof? Those kind of expenses are capitalized expenses and are written off differently by the property owner and should be apportioned to you differently as well. Normally, these big ticket items, called capital items, are written off over their useful life. Many leases define this useful life for all items as 12 years. So if the roof costs $96,000, that would be divided by 12 years in this example, which is $8,000 per year, that would be passed through to the tenants on a monthly basis based on their percentage of occupancy. You may also want to have the right to move out of the space if a capital item is going to be passed through if you are in the last 12 months of your occupancy. Okay, so I hope now you have a better understanding of the type of leases in CAM. We'll go on to talk about a lot of other lease issues in future podcasts, so stay tuned. If you are thinking of going forward with a project, you might want to talk to lender Matthew Christie of Bank of America. He really knows a lot and can help you. And B of A always has a lot of loan options available, usually at good rates. Matt works nationwide, and I'm sure you can Google him, but his email is matthew.christie@bankofamerica.com. Please subscribe to Dentistry Rising on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or whatever your favorite player is. And if you want to talk about something in particular, you can always email me at drrobin@bettyrobin.com or comment on Twitter or Instagram, Dr. Betty Robin. Thank you and happy listening.